Welcome to this short video in the series of short videos on Android Lollipop programming. And in this video, we're going to look at Java, the underlying language that we build our Android applications in. So let's open up Android Studio and create a new project. Let's give it a name and leave everything else as default. Click Next. I always suggest you pick the version before the version of Android you want to develop. So KitKat, leave everything else as default and finish. Wait for our application to build. When the application has built, open up the main activity Java file. Java is an object-oriented programming language. That means instead of having functions with flow, we have classes and objects. So a class here is an object blueprint, the main activity. It's created and initiated by Android. And here we have the methods, which are points of interaction between the class. A class can also have some variables. Here we're creating variables that are relevant to this class. Objects generally have a concept of inheritance. So for example, we can inherit functionality from other classes and objects. In this example, the main activity is extending the app compact activity. This provides some functionality to our class that we can utilize, or instead, we can add what makes our main activity unique. Another concept of object-oriented programming is an interface. This lets us define a set of common methods that objects can use. So here I am creating a robot interface. A robot can dance, and a robot can take over the world. So now I'm going to create an Android robot that implements the robot interface. And we'll notice, as always, Android Studio is being very useful, and things will be highlighted in red when something is wrong. And initially when we create this class, we'll get some red because we also need to then use the methods that we had defined in the interface to perform relevant functionality. So if we create a dance function and a take over the world function, now the red lines are gone. Another Java concept that is very useful to us in Android programming is that of packages. This is a way of grouping together collections of classes, functionality in one package. And this is our default application package. And here you can see that we've imported functionality from pre-existing packages. And we could create our own, of course, that others could use. Next, let's look at variables. Variables are basically places and properties that we use throughout our code. So here we have variables passed between functions. We have variables that are just relevant to this method. And these are special variables, things like toolbar, are something sort of fairly special to Android. Variables have what is called a scope. So a variable that is created inside a method is only available inside that method. A variable created inside a class is accessible by the whole class. So here we're creating a toolbar. This is only available in this onCreate method. If we create a variable inside this onClick method, for example, an integer, this is only local and has a scope and is only seen by this onClick method. And here we have parameters. Parameters are variables that are passed to a method and then can be accessed inside that method. Variables in Java are statically typed. This means we actually need to declare the data type of each variable. Let's create a float type variable. This is a variable that starts out as a whole number, but can have other types of numerical values as well, like decimals. Then we have a Boolean. This is a logical true or false value that we can check to evaluate logical conditions. Now this is a char. This is just one single character of text. And in this case, we use single quotes to show this. Next, we have a string. This has to be set in double quotes. Let's look at operators. These are ways of assigning values. In this case, equals. Something is equal to a value of something else, the left to the right. And then ways of doing logical checks, which are a fundamental part of programming. So this is saying if ID is equal to the value on the right, this is if it's not equal to, with the exclamation mark, and if the conditions are met, then true is returned. If we wanted to add more than one check, we could add an AND. This says both of these checks have to return true. If we wanted either, then we would put the double pipe, which is the OR, so only one has to return true. This is a less than or equal to that value. This is a greater than or equal to that value. Java has some other common code syntax. So we have these curly brackets that dictate classes and functions, and they must match each other. Every line must end with a semicolon. And Android Studio will help us completing with a lot of these. This is a single line comment, the double slash. If we wanted to make a multi-line comment, we could just put a double slash in front of each line, or we can use this syntax, the single slash and the star, and keep adding our lines of comments, and then close it with the reverse, an asterisk and a slash. A common thing we need to do in programming is make logical checks. We saw one already, this if statement that we're looking at right now. What are some other ways we can do control and logical checks? Okay, so we've already seen an if statement. So this says that if a condition in the brackets returns true, then do something inside the curly brackets. What if it doesn't return true? Well, we can have an else. This is a default catch-all statement that is processed if the check isn't matched. If we want to get more complicated, we can use an else if. So we create some else ifs. And then a final else. And those else ifs will also need brackets next to them to do the logical check. It says if this, do this, else if do this, else if do that, and if all else fails, handle the else. And here is a switch. This allows us to do something more complex. We take a value we want to check and we say, if it's this value, execute this code. If it's this value, then execute this code. And then if nothing else, execute what's inside default. And the break statement just exits us out of that. We also have flow. So these are how we can perform repetitive tasks through loops. And there's several types of loop. So here's me doing the same thing 3 times. The for loop starts with an initialized value, and up to a value increases it by 1 each time, executing the code inside the loop. Then we have while. Here, we start with the initialized value outside of the loop, and then say whilst it's equal to a particular value, execute a function, increase the value. And finally, we have do while. Here again is very similar to while, but the check happens after the first iteration of the loop. So I hope you enjoyed this brief introduction to the Java programming language that will be useful to us as Android programmers. We covered a lot of language basics and the ways that we write our code. I do hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you for the next one in the series. Thank you very much.